Hello, everybody. We will get started in just a moment.
Hey, Ryan.
Hello.
Thank
You
you
are
all
now
for joining.
the presenter, Michael.
Okay, great. Well, thanks for joining us, everybody. Let's give folks just in one more minute to join, and then we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you for everybody who's signed on already. Just to kind of go over a little bit about what we'll do while we're waiting for folks. I'm going to give a little bit of an intro to the Portworx by Pure Storage platform. For different folks are coming in with different levels of kind of background and knowledge on Portworx, so I want to make sure that we level set with everybody. And then I also want to give you a chance to see the product in action. So Ryan's prepared some demos for us that he's going to walk through, and then we'll keep it really interactive and ask us questions. So there are a number of different ways to do that in GoToWebinar. You can use the chat, you can ask questions. So as we go through, please just pop things in, and Ryan and I can engage with the chat, and then we can also kind of talk about them live. So let's go ahead and get started in just 1 minute. I'm gonna pull up my screen, and so I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna do video. Hey everybody, so you can see me. And let's do a little screen share as well. All right, how is that? And let's go ahead and get started. So again, we've had a couple of people that have joined since I just did my my introduction. So thanks for joining us today. My name is Michael Franti, head of product marketing here at Portworx, and I'm joined by Ryan Wallner, our fantastic technical marketing engineer. And what we're going to do today for you is kind of give you a little bit of an overview, a background on the Portworx by Pure Storage platform. Just to get everybody up to speed and on the same playing field with respect to kind of background and use cases and things like that. Then we actually want to show the product in action. So Ryan's prepared some demos for us that we're going to walk through, and then we want to hear from you. So what questions do you have? Please, chime in with those as we go through the presentations. Don't just wait for the end. Sometimes I can answer them directly as we're going through, and sometimes, Ryan can do the same how he's demoing, and then we can actually have a broader discussion as well. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and just kind of provide a little background on Portworx. We call Portworx a Kubernetes data services platform. And what we mean by that is anytime you run a stateful application, a database, a queue, a key value store, big data, ML, machine learning, AI, data analytics, right? I could go on and use all the buzzwords. You care about a number of things. You care about, storage provisioning, right? The ability to persist data. You care about high availability. You care about data protection. You care about data security. Increasingly, you care about mobility. And that's what Portworx provides for Kubernetes applications, because Kubernetes is its own way of managing applications. And the way that we did data security for our vSphere environment doesn't necessarily port over to Kubernetes, and the way that we did data protection for our Microsoft SQL Server running on Hyper-V doesn't necessarily apply to Kubernetes. So we have to think about not how do we reinvent the wheel, but how do we do these classic data management techniques or capabilities in a Kubernetes native way. And we want to do it for any application, running in any cloud, on any infrastructure, and at every stage of the application lifecycle. And that's what Portworx by Pure Storage provides. The chances are the reason you're here is because you have some data problem that you're trying to solve in order to drive your business forward. We say data is the new oil, right? Yeah, data is just, it's so important to everything that we do and everything that business does. It's really the companies that can collect the most data, analyze it the most efficiently, predict what their customers want, are those that are going to succeed in kind of the modern business environment. And then the question becomes, well, how do I get more out of my data, right? How do I actually execute on a modern data strategy? Well, increasingly, digital leaders like you are choosing a cloud native stack of technologies in order to solve these business problems, right? In order to get the insights out of their data. And those apps, that platform is running across, cloud environments as well as on-prem environments. It usually has some type of container management at its core. Increasingly, that's Kubernetes. Containers are the building blocks. We're running, sometimes dozens of different open source database technologies on top of this platform, right? It's no longer all we run is SQL, all we run is Oracle, right? There's a host of options. And then there are kind of cultural changes, there are people and process changes that accompany this move to cloud native. You can kind of, pick your stat on how advanced this is. I think we all realize that, no matter where any individual company is for any particular application, overall as an industry, we're moving very quickly to this point where, really some of the most important applications in our portfolio are running in a cloud native manner. 451 points that of new applications, 95% are already running in containers. Gartner is seeing kind of similar things, that these cloud native apps tend to be multi-site, multi-data center. 81% of enterprises are running in more than 2 cloud providers, and that by 2025, 85% of global businesses will be running containers in production. So it's real, it's happening. That's why you're here on our call today. The issue becomes, as we move these cloud native applications into production, there's a whole host of storage data management issues that are not solved solely by the container management platform or our infrastructure provider. So we have to answer questions that we've already answered for our VMware environment, that we've already answered for even applications that are running in AWS or running in Azure and Google, which is, how do I move my data between clouds? How do I protect sensitive user data for these apps running in Kubernetes? How do I, perform data protection? And that could be backup and recovery. It could be zero RPO disaster recovery, right? What you mean by data protection depends a little bit on your business, on your application, but we have to figure out how to solve those issues specifically for Kubernetes. We could talk about security as well, right? How do I do role-based access control at the Kubernetes layer? How do I, make sure that all of my data is encrypted? How do I support general compliance and governance concerns? It won't surprise you, right, after my lead-in, that Portworx is the way that you do all of those things. Portworx delivers what we call a modern data experience for cloud native applications, and it doesn't matter the environment you're running them in. It doesn't matter kind of the level of data protection or security that you're looking for. We provide those capabilities optimized for Kubernetes workloads. If you don't have much background on Portworx, we're really, by joining Pure, combining 2 market leaders. So Portworx, recognized as the #1 Kubernetes storage platform by by the GigaOM Radar report, also a leader in their Kubernetes data protection report. And then of course, Pure Storage is, don't tell Gartner I said this, the leader in the primary Magic Quadrant, right? This is highlighting the primary storage Magic Quadrant from 2020, Pure Storage all the way up and to the right? Just a fantastic solution in that space. And by bringing Portworx into the fold, now Pure and Portworx offer a unified platform for running any enterprise application, no matter if it's in a cloud native manner or in a traditional operating environment. Portworx itself is the most widely used Kubernetes data services platform by enterprise customers, by SaaS companies, and by companies that are operating 100% in the cloud. So we have some of the logos of some of our favorite customers. Of course, they're all our favorite, but I chose these because we wanted to provide kind of a range of industries and use cases. We have everything from gaming companies like Roblox, right? If you don't know Roblox, your kids or your grandkids probably do. 150 monthly active users, completely running in the cloud. Then we've got financial services companies and major telcos. The unifying theme is that all of these companies have said, we're going to fuel our digital transformation with cloud native technologies. We're going to build apps around Kubernetes so that we can move faster. But data is still really important to us. So we can't give up on security and availability and data protection. We need that too, and we're going to use Portworx to deliver on both of those promises. The Portworx platform itself, and this is what, when I stop talking, Ryan will be a demo for us, is a software platform that allows you to provide those key data management and storage capabilities for any stateful application that runs on Linux, using any Kubernetes distribution, right? It doesn't matter if it's OpenShift or Tanzu or AKS or EKS or IKS or any of the other KSs that will come after it. As long as it runs on Kubernetes, Portworx can handle it. In any cloud or infrastructure, and I specify infrastructure because I really want to be clear about, definitely on-prem. Of course, you can run Portworx on-prem, but you can even run Portworx on top of other companies' storage. So we have lots of companies that are running Portworx on Pure Storage, FlashArray, but we also have customers that are running Portworx on NetApp. And that's a really key part of the Portworx value proposition, which is we're 100% software defined, and we abstract away the underlying storage so that if you can be on-prem on NetApp in one environment, and then take that app and run it unmodified on Amazon, it's going to work because Portworx is handling the complexity of underneath. And that will continue. That's the case now, and it'll continue to be the case, even though we're now part of Pure Storage. And then because DevOps projects, they have their own life cycle, oftentimes will start as kind of small incubation projects and then grow from there and ultimately run in production environments. Portworx has a variety of ways in which you can get started. Very low risk, very low friction with some of our freemium offerings like Portworx Essentials. You can upgrade to Portworx Enterprise only when you're ready, when you need to. And then we have flexible pay-as-you-go licensing as well. So even when you decide to upgrade, it's not like you have to make a huge commitment. You can just pay as you go. So the Portworx platform itself is made up of 6 modules. And these modules are really around those core storage and data management capabilities. So let me talk a little bit about each of them. So pxStore is our core software-defined storage layer built from the ground up for Kubernetes. So Kubernetes are highly dynamic environments, high scale, high density, multi-tenant environments. And so we're not just talking about provisioning one volume, we're talking about provisioning potentially hundreds or thousands of volumes in very, very rapid succession. And the Portworx layer was designed to automate that entire process. So you think about in the past, kind of an individual provisioning storage for an application, that doesn't scale when it comes to Kubernetes. You need software that can do all of those things, and it needs to be highly available. It needs to handle replication, and those are all things that pxStore does. PX Backup is all about backup and recovery of Kubernetes applications. Backup and recovery works different in a Kubernetes environment because it's not just the data. You can't just take a machine snapshot or a server snapshot and then recover it within a Kubernetes environment, because Kubernetes includes a lot of application configuration, various Kubernetes objects and pieces of configuration. Maybe it's operators, maybe it's service accounts, maybe it's deployments and services. All of these things are basically metadata that also need to be backed up and recovered as part of that restore. And so PX Backup is a web interface that does all of this for you and allows you to seamlessly protect your Kubernetes environments. PXDR takes that data protection one step further and says, you know, what if I have an application that really needs the very lowest levels of, or very highest levels of data protection, right? I need all the way to RPO 0, data loss across 2 completely separate operating environments. That's what pxDR can provide, both in kind of low latency networks, kind of in metro area networks, as well as across a wide area network. PX Migrate, as it sounds like, it's all about moving entire applications between environments, not just data, but apps as well. PX Secure is all about role-based access controls encryption at a container granular level so that you can bring that sensitive user data onto your Kubernetes platform and not have to trade off, you know, speed for security. And finally, PX Autopilot is all about automating some of the kind of highly manual intensive processes that often accompany scaling enterprise applications. Things like, you know, storage provisioning, increasing and decreasing capacity. And not only do we automate that, but that automation actually helps drive a lot of cost savings. And we've seen customers that are, you know, spending half of what they otherwise would running Kubernetes applications in the cloud because they're using Portworx and because they can automate so much of that that provisioning, that they can actually provision a lot less, knowing that if they ever do need more, they can simply bring it on in real time. How are we doing on time? Let me walk you through about 2 more minutes, and then I'm going to turn it over to Ryan. So I want to, in these next 3 slides, just give you a little bit of a taste of some of the range of customers that Portworx has, because, you know, we have customers at all stages of development, all industries. And I think seeing kind of, you know, what a couple of different customers are doing will give you a breadth of how we could put together a solution just for you. So this one is all about data protection, and it's data protection in financial services. So, right, very, very high-end use case where the cost of failure is very high, and the tolerance for risk is low, right? You wouldn't normally think about this as a place to apply Kubernetes, right? These new or so-called bleeding edge technologies, but it's exactly because Kubernetes enables you know, applications to run at scale and allows companies to accelerate their development that it's perfect for those types of use cases. In this case, though, RBC had a challenge where they had an app that they wanted to be able to run in Kubernetes because they needed to take advantage of the speed and the automation that Kubernetes provided, but they had a traditional disaster recovery requirement, which was for 0 RPO, so 0 data loss, even if we lost an entire data center. And we were able to work with them to bring that application over to Kubernetes to synchronously replicate every single database write into one data center to another data center, so that if they lost an entire environment, they could bring that application up in the secondary environment. And I forgot to mention, it wasn't just the data that we're replicating, it's also all of those Kubernetes objects, that Kubernetes configuration that's absolutely critical for your fast recovery. So that's use case number 1. Use case number 2 is T-Mobile. I call this a consumer scale enterprise PaaS. What I mean by that is T-Mobile is using Kubernetes to offer a platform as a service to their internal developers so that they can just focus on writing business applications and not focus on operations. These business apps are used primarily to power the in-store experience for T-Mobile customers. So you walk into a T-Mobile store and you buy a new handset, right? All of the back office applications to make that happen are written in-house, and those applications need to run somewhere, and increasingly the place that they're running is Kubernetes. I call it consumer scale because, you know, T-Mobile has thousands of shops, and when a new iPhone comes out or a new Samsung, like the volume in the in-store traffic can spike dramatically. And in order to be able to handle that volume, in order to be able to respond quickly to marketing's desire to run a new promotion or offer a new service, those internal teams need to both move very quickly, but those apps then also need to be at a scale. And Portworx was able to deliver the kind of complete data management lifecycle for T-Mobile, all running on top of pure flash array, so that provisioning, encryption, backup, and more were able to run within a Kubernetes environment. And finally, I'd like to talk about ESRI. So ESRI is a company that's increasingly in the news. I used to, when I did this presentation, talk about ESRI as the company you use but never heard of. Now increasingly people are hearing about them because a lot of their geospatial analytics is used for things like COVID tracking, disaster management, fire management. Their ArcGIS platform is a geospatial analytics platform that has been in the market for 50 years, but increasingly our customers want to consume it via SaaS service. So they just log into ArcGIS and then they can see all of their data and they can analyze all their data. ESRI runs that SaaS service on the cloud, but because of the nature of their business, right? They have to offer a highly available web service built on top of kind of fundamentally unreliable commodity hardware, right? This is a cloud service, so we have a fleet of servers. Any one of those servers could go away at any one point, but we at the application level we build in that availability. They do that with Kubernetes and they do that with Portworx, so that the end result for their customer is kind of this always-on platform where they can analyze their mission-critical data. But ESRI has the benefit of kind of the scale up and the scale down that the cloud provides without any of the kind of the negative aspects of that can come from a data management perspective. So that's kind of a high-level overview of Portworx. And with that, I'd actually like to turn it over to Ryan now to walk us through some demos, and you can see how it works in action. And I'll just, while Ryan is actually, let me stop sharing. And then while Ryan is pulling up his screen, I'll remind folks that if you have any questions about anything that I've said or anything that went as Ryan's going, feel free to put it in the into the chat or the questions tab, and we will we'll answer those as best we can. Over to you, Ryan.
Okay, yes, thank you, Michael. So as Michael said, I'm going to go through a demo here, and these monthly demos will sort of focus on kind of one area that we talk about during Michael's presentation. There's a lot to show, so every month you can get sort of something different. This month we're going to really focus on PX backup. So Michael did show you this slide during the presentation, and it's really going to focus on what really is an application consistent backup for Kubernetes. What does it look like? How do you add clusters? How do you kind of pick and choose what resources or applications or data you want to back up as part of that backup? And of course, we'll go through kind of how to restore it and how it works. Before I do that, though, I do want to mention, my demos here have Portworx already installed, but if you want to get started with Portworx, head on over to central.portworx.com. This will kind of give you a landing page here, and you can sign in with various different ways. You can sign up or sign in with Google or sign in with GitHub. I have an account here. I like to use GitHub. And when you sign in, you'll get sort of presented with this screen that's really a choice between what product you want to install. So Portworx has a number of different ones. Essentials is sort of our free tier, free forever. You get 5 terabytes of storage. Portworx Enterprise is a 30-day trial. You would simply select these. And PX Backup, which I'm going to show you today, is you would select PX Backup and click Next. There's also some license server and monitoring that you can add to your central deployments and things like that. So definitely head on over to central.portworx.com. Once you select one of these, it'll actually bring you through a fairly easy to follow spec generation, basically a file generation that it'll give you the exact commands that you need to run on your Kubernetes cluster in order to get either PX Backup or PX Enterprise installed. So without further ado, let's log into backup. So if you go through that process and produce a backup spec or install it via Helm, you will be presented with this screen, which is the central or backup login screen. I'm going to log in here with my admin account. session expired from before. And in this backup scenario, or this backup instance here, I have 3 different clusters. So I have an on-prem Kubernetes cluster running Portworx. It's actually running on the Rancher platform, kind of designated by the name here from it. I have another production cluster, which is using Upstream. You can see the versions of Kubernetes these are running, so 119.7, 118.6, and then I have sort of an Azure AKS cluster, which is running 118.4. And so it gives you sort of a single pane of glass over all your different Kubernetes deployments, all your different platforms that you're using. And if you want to go ahead and back up your applications within these, it's fairly simple. So in this case, I have an application here in my production cluster, which is running within the web demo namespace. The namespaces you have access to, you will see here. And when you actually add clusters to PX Backup, it takes in your Kubernetes configuration, your user configuration. So if you're an admin and you add a cluster to backup, you will have access to your, anything an admin would. If you are a user, you will have access to only the specific user namespaces that you have access to. In this case, I am an admin user. I can see many namespaces. I'm going to select web demo here. When you select this, it'll actually bring up every piece of that namespace, meaning every config map, secret, persistent volume claim, deployment, or stateful set that's running as part of that namespace. In this case, I have sort of a 2-tier web application, which is running a web service, which is a deployment here, which is a counter application, and I'll show you what that actually does. And that counter application, that web service, is talking to a Postgres database. And that Postgres database is backed by Portworx. And so we have a persistent volume claim here that is usable. Of course, we have a service for Postgres and a service for our web application and the database itself. So this application, what it actually does here is it's just a web application that when you click on the screen, you'll start to update sort of the database, the Postgres database in the background with records of the coordinates of kind of where you're clicking on the screen. And so this is just a simple way to say that we have now added 10 records to our database, and we can simply back this up and make sure everything sort of gets backed up with that state in mind. Now, when I installed this application, the first thing I did was take it back up so that I have a clean slate, right? So we could always revert back to the application with nothing in the database, with just the initial configuration. But now that I've added data, let's go ahead and take another backup. To back up this application, simply go to the screen in the namespace and click backup. You would want to give it a name. So we're going to say demo back 001. The backup location I've pre-configured again for this demo, but a simple explanation is it's any S3 compatible storage, meaning that if you have, something like FlashBlade, or you have an AWS account, you want to use S3, or even Azure Blob. You can see here I have an Azure Blob, or even FlashBlade from Pure has an S3 compatible endpoint. You can select this and configure it so that your backups actually go to that sort of object or blob storage. This is really useful because you can kind of put your backups with the Kubernetes objects and all the data to a safe location. Maybe it's offsite or just in a different failure domain, or in the cloud if you want to stage it up there. And we have the option here to back up on a schedule, meaning that we can back this up daily, hourly, and we can create these schedules. So if you want it to be every 15 minutes or every Thursday at 10 o'clock, that's absolutely doable. We're just going to do a single backup, so we're going to select now, meaning it's just going to happen immediately. We can optionally do some add some metadata for ourselves. So here we can say, go to webinar demo equals true or something like that, and then we'll hit create, right? And this backup, what's actually happening is it'll go into sort of a pending state. You'll see some information here in terms of the volumes it's backing up, the resources. But if you want to dig in and sort of double click, you can click on show details here, and it'll give you sort of all the resources that are part of it, and we sort of covered these, but this gives you a snapshot of what that backup contains. You can obviously delete the backup from here. If you do a quick refresh, you can see now we have one volume, which comes up with the Portworx logo because it is a Portworx Kubernetes volume and 7 resources. So the show details will actually give you a little more information now, such as how much data is in there, right? Small database, only 97 meg. But it says that the volumes and resources were both backed up successfully, and that this is the PVC that we've backed up. So now we have a backup, right? So what's interesting here is now we can click on this backup and restore our backup. And we can do that to a number of different applications, right? But what I want to show first is sort of restoring to the same production use case. So I'm going to search here for web, which is our base backup. I mentioned this early, right? So this is no data in that backup at all. So right now we still have the live data, and we can actually restore this application, and we'll give it a name. So restore 1, sure. And we'll go to on-prem production because that's where it came from. We're gonna not do a customer store. A customer store is actually just a way for you to give a little more input into how that restore happens, meaning, does it actually restore to a new namespace or the same namespace? In this case, we're just going to default same namespace, and we're going to overwrite any existing resources, meaning that we want to sort of revert this. Maybe someone added data to production too early, or we want to bring it back to a point in time. And so that's it. You click restore on the cluster you want, and you can see here that it does a very similar sort of process for restoring the application itself. And we can refresh and get more data as it comes along, such as a restore will go ahead and restore those PVCs first. It will then move on to the resources such as the deployment, the config map, and the services and things like that. And just like before, we can get details about what's actually happening. So the application restore is now in process, and that PVC is what was initially stored. You can see the data is sort of less than the second backup we took. So once this actually completes, what we'll see here is actually, let's get this is the cluster we're working out of. We can do a cube, CTL, get pods on the web demo namespace. Is that the namespace we're working out of? Let's see. It is. So what actually the restore does, it'll actually delete what's in it because what I selected was for the backup to overwrite any existing resources and data. So I had the right namespace there, but it was in the middle of, I caught it in the middle of it doing its thing. So now we can see that my deployment is back up in terms of the web database. And so the Postgres database is coming up again. So the Postgres database is now up. And so now I should see sort of a fresh slate. And this kind of shows you that I can restore back to a point in time which I had a clean slate. And the same thing is possible if I wanted to go to a totally different cluster. Now, remember before when we went in here, I have 3 different clusters. One's on-prem, and then I have another in Azure. Now, say I wanted to take that same backup that we just took before and restore it to the cloud. Well, that's absolutely something we can do. The only thing we do here differently is select the cloud cluster as our destination. And so this will actually go ahead and restore everything to the cloud base cluster, and that's really quite that simple. So, PX Backup has a number of different features. I want to show you one, which is something called rules. And so there's a settings tab here, which is where everything is sort of configured. Now, this instance of backup has my clusters already added. It has my backup locations already configured, but this is also where you do that, right? So in cloud settings, you can see I have cloud accounts and backup locations. So this is definitely where you'd configure those various components. But I did want to talk about rules. So rules are a really cool feature where, say you had a specific application that, something like MongoDB, which I have an example here for, that you wanted to make application consistent, meaning that all data is sort of quiesced and flushed to disk before any backup is taken, or maybe you wanted to run some sort of oplog command for MongoDB, right? This is where you would go ahead and configure pre-backup rules and post-backup rules. So really what this gives you is the opportunity to create specific command-driven rules that get run pre-snapshot for that backup and post-snapshot for that backup. So let's go take a look at this pre-exec rule. If we just look at edit, what you do to configure this is you give it a name. I prefer to give these sort of an obvious name. So if you want to run this as a pre-exec rule, I like to put in the pre-exec in the name just because it makes it easier when you're sort of identifying them in your backup. And then you want to use a key value pair or multiple pairs to actually select what application it's going to be. So before we took a backup of our web application and restored it, and we took a backup of the whole namespace. Now, obviously, this rule is only applicable to the Mongo deployment. And so here is where we sort of define, app is Mongo, and I'll show you that is actually applicable just to that deployment. And some Kubernetes deployments, stateful sets have multiple containers. They have sidecar containers. This is where you'd be able to select what specific container this command gets run. Now, if you're familiar with Mongo, this is just a CLI command that you can run against Mongo if you were on the Mongo CLI. And what it actually does is it locks the database and syncs everything to disk. And so what we can do here, instead of running those commands by hand, having downtime, sort of manual downtime for the application and running the backup and then kind of bringing things back online, you can set these rules up so it happens sort of at an instant. And so this will lock and sync the data as our pre-exec rule. And if we go back here, too far back out, back to my rules and look at the post-exec rule. I think I did the post-exec rule. Either way, there's a unsync. So I think this one was, so this one is sync lock and the other one's unsync. And so the basic idea is you put the pre-exec rule to sync and lock, and then the backup happens, and then afterwards the unsync happens and the unlock happens. And so what that actually looks like, let's head over to our namespace that has MongoDB in it. And what we can do here is, just like before, set up a backup by clicking backup and give it a Mongo backup name. Give it the location as well. And here is our pre and post rules. Now, simply for pre-exec rule, select the pre-exec rule. This is where the naming comes in handy, that it's easy to see what rule is meant for pre and post. And post, we select the post-exec rule, and that's it. That's how you set up that rule to happen pre and post. And when you click back up, what you'll actually see, if you catch it good enough, is that the backup status will actually show you that the pre-exec rule is being executed. So you know that that rule is being run in Mongo prior to any backup happening. So this gives you sort of the peace of mind that this backup is absolutely application consistent and that you're locking and syncing up the data that you needed for that application. And then the backup takes place and moves on. And so you don't have to run anything by hand. These are all sort of an automated way to do it in a single pane of glass within PX Backup. And again, after that happens, the resources and volumes will be backed up just as before. Each cluster has its own sort of view into the world in terms of what backups happen where, but you can get all backups in terms of which ones are succeeding, which ones may be failing, those kind of things. We also have Lighthouse, which is sort of the UI built into backup and central for Portworx. So if you install backup, you'll see this. You can add clusters that run Portworx to get sort of in even more fine-grained detail of sort of what PVCs are in the cluster. Here is sort of the view of sort of what volumes and drives are being used, what pools are available, what IO priority they have. So, you know, backup is a quite powerful product across your, you know, your clusters that you're running Kubernetes and Portworx with, and allows you to sort of you know, backup applications that are cloud native in a way that makes sure the all the resources, all the data sort of are contained in that unit of backup, and you can restore them across to, various clouds as well. So that should be a general overview of sort of what PX Backup can do for you sort of day one, in terms of once you have your clusters added to the backup interface and you're working with applications and how to use rules. Now I want to stop there and see if we have, you know, or if you do have any questions, feel free to put them. Looks like we do. So let's see. I want to make sure and get to these. Let's see.
And I answered the first two, but we can reiterate for folks that aren't watching the chat panel. So the first one was, does PX Backup install Portworx Essentials components? Do you want to answer that one, Ryan?
Yeah, sure. So the question, sorry, I thought you were about to take it. Does it install PX Essential components? So PX Backup is its own product. So PX Essentials, as I was showing you before in the spec generator, is part of our software-defined storage product. So PX Backup is specifically a backup and restore product. PX Essentials is our version of software-defined storage that is Portworx Enterprise, just at a limited sort of a limited capacity and kind of free forever usage in terms of licensing. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. I think we're working on trying to get Essentials capability of backup, but I don't think it's available yet. We'll see where that goes. But yeah, they're two separate products in general. Hopefully that answers your question.
Awesome, thank you. So the next question, and I think you showed this in your demo, is can I restore Kubernetes objects in a granular manner? For example, restore only a deployment or services or a PV or a PVC?
Yeah, I actually didn't. That's a really good point. I didn't get to
okay, I'm projecting. I thought I saw the granular.
Yeah, so how you would do that, so let's go back to that first example, right? So if I were to back up, I just selected backup here, and you can see everything is selected over on the left. There's two ways to do this. You can either unselect and select just the resources you want to, and then click backup, right? And then when you click backup, you should see that only config map and service are backed up here. Or you can look for the type of resource. So say I wanted to only back up my persistent volume claims, I filter based on this, and then I back up just as I would, and now I'm only selecting my persistent volume claim. So that's a great question, and hopefully that answers it.
Yeah, this is, I think, one of the favorite features that customers have, because it actually turns out that I think probably in more instances you want to restore just something versus everything in your Kubernetes cluster, and this makes it super simple. And I think it really speaks to the power of Kubernetes native backups, in the idea that the thing that you might want to restore in your app is not necessarily the data, it's actually the configuration. That stuff is so important. So the last question, and I'll take this one, Ryan, is can I provide some information about PX Backup licenses? Yeah, so PX Backup is licensed the same way as Portworx Enterprise. That's by node. And then we have a flexible model for all of our products around annual licenses or pay-as-you-go licensing. So if you basically let us know, how big your Kubernetes cluster is, we can tell you, is it 10 worker nodes? Is it 20 worker nodes? That would basically be how many PX Backup licenses you would purchase. And then if you want to do an annual agreement for that, or you want to do pay-as-you-go, both of those are options for you. So that is all the questions so far. So I will, I'll reiterate, folks, if you have any other questions, even some real zingers, right? This is live, so you can put me and Ryan on the spot. Makes it more fun for us and for you. Knock knock jokes, really anything you can think of. Okay, great. Just someone saying thanks for the information and great stuff, and would love to see a PX migrate and PX autopilot demo next if possible. So that's a great question. So one thing is you don't have to wait for next months to see those. You use Google's awesome. Just Portworx PX autopilot. You're going to find tons of resources that Ryan's put together about these other demos. And also, if you want to schedule some one-on-one time with us to talk through your specific use case, just go to the Portworx website and click Request a Demo. That'll create a form. Just tell us what you're looking for, and we're always happy to schedule some time one-on-one to show you those capabilities and really how they integrate with your own environment.
Yeah, and I will say that we'll be doing these sort of demos every month, and I can tell you that the next couple will be sort of working with databases on Portworx, so that'll be the next one. That we will cover things like how to kind of expand volumes. I don't know if we'll cover autopilot directly in that one, but that'll be somewhere we could talk about that. And the one after that is definitely going to cover DR in terms of kind of cross-site disaster recovery. So I do know those are the next two if you want to stop by in the next month or even the next one.
Awesome. Any other questions? All right. So Ryan, since you have your screen share, can you just go to the Portworx website and just show people again how to sign up, where they can go to portworx.com and then click on create an account. Yeah, Portworx for free. So that button up there at the top, that'll bring you to PX Central, which is what Ryan's logged in right now. But
I'm already signed in.
Yeah, it'll bring you to a landing page where you'll be able to create your free Portworx account. So if you want to try PX Backup, you go here. If you want to try Portworx Essentials, which is our storage product for small production clusters, or even test dev environments, or Portworx Enterprise, which is our full-featured enterprise product, go to the same place, create a free account, and Portworx Essentials is what we call free forever, meaning you can use it up to 5 nodes. There is no time limit. It's not time-based. Portworx Enterprise has a free 30-day trial, and you can use that on 1,000 nodes if you want. The goal there is really for you to be able to really test it and make sure that it is up to your requirements. And then PX Backup also has a free 30-day free trial. And then Portworx Enterprise and PX Backup are 2 paid products. You can do annual-based licensing, or you can do pay-as-you-go pricing. So really flexible ways to get started with both of those products. If there are no more questions, I think we will sign off. Thank you so much for joining us today. And yeah, looking forward to either seeing you next month or, again, feel free to ping us through the Portworx website. Really happy to have a one-on-one call with you and talk about how Portworx can help. Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of your day. Bye.